Are you ready to manage your work and personal world better to live a more fulfilling, productive life? Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Productivity Cast, the weekly show about all things productivity. Here are your hosts, Ray Sidney Smith and Augusto Pinaud.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Productivity Cast, the weekly show about all things personal productivity. I'm your host, Ray Sidney Smith, and I'm here with
Augusto Pinaud. Good morning.
We're going to kick into this show with an interesting topic, I think, or at least I believe Augusto and I both believe this is an interesting topic because we decided to talk about it. And so the mixing and sort of interesting current situation with regard to Google's operating systems. Those of you out there who are in the know, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't know, Google has basically, they have several operating systems that they're currently in development with, and you know, most popularly, Android, the Google-owned operating system they've owned for many years now, and it runs, you know, most of the phones in the world. And then there is Google's Chrome OS, and Chrome OS is the operating system that runs the Chromebooks, the laptops, as well as the little mini, you know, devices that they have, and they have these things that were going to come out called the Chrome Sticks or whatever they were called, but they were basically little. They look like an Amazon Fire Stick or basically a really big thumb drive, and you'd stick it into a monitor, and it would turn it into a computer. And they plan on, you know, obviously putting the Chrome OS on many other devices, and so that's Chrome OS. And of course, there have been many media leaks about this idea of Google currently in development of a new operating system. And so we wanted to talk about what that really meant and what the future of potentially an Android Chrome OS merge, or really where the future of Android's operating systems go. And that really has a lot of effect on our personal productivity, as we said in the last episode, because, you know, you have to decide on what you're going to learn and how much you're going to utilize your systems. And when you have multiple operating systems, that can sometimes be a drag on the system. So, Augusto, you had brought up the topic originally, and so I'm curious about what your initial thoughts were about this.
As the people has ever, find me before this episode know, I've been an iPad only for many years now, and actually from 2011. And one of the arguments I've been making about iPad only is that for most people, they don't need a really, or what we know as a full computer. Okay, most people really what they need is a good browser and a couple of basic things. And cost-wise, the cost of a machine has really go significantly down, and you can keep a much better machine than your old PC that will do everything and more of what you need, getting a different solution. In my case, I pick iOS. I like iOS. But if you pick iOS, Android will work, Chrome will work, and now that they are both, somehow happily merging, it's going to end up with a powerful marriage of those two. And for many people continue thinking, oh, well, it is, if it's going to be for work or I'm going to be working, you need to have a PC or you need to have a Mac. And the reality these days is that horizon, it's a lot more broader. You really have your PCs, you really have your Macs, and then you have iOS, Android / Chrome as your full operating system and as a machine that can really do everything that you need and everything that at least most people need. Yes, there's going to be the people who need something specific, but for most people, an iOS or a Chromebook, it's plenty. And what people don't, I was recently upgrade my iOS to a 12.9 inches iPad. is huge, no question about it. And that was part of my idea, get that huge thing. And somebody asked me, I don't understand why you are basically spending the same amount of money that you could spend on a Mac, but you are getting an iPad. That doesn't make any sense to me. And that's a lot of what I found when I talk about technology. Same thing with the Chromebooks. People have not yet come to see that these platforms are complete and fully capable to be not only a substitute for what you have, but in many cases they're really even better than what you can do for the kind of things you do on a regular PC or a Mac. Same thing with the Chromebooks. When you go and get a Chromebook, you can do so much with them. With really such smooth. If you get that same price point and then go for a PC, okay, it's true. You can find, computers PC compatible for the same $200. What you don't understand is that you are getting 5 years ago technology instead of 2017 technology. You are getting a computer that will barely run Windows versus a computer that will keep being fast and effective. That is the reason it's a fascinating topic for me, and it is still quite interesting for me to see how many companies and how many even IT departments have not seen the power of move and train your employees to something better.
It's actually quite fascinating to me because, I think the area where I've seen the most investment right now is in education, in the, student classroom market. And I think that's because the devices are really inexpensive comparative to the rest of the market. As you said, you can either get up-to-date processors and other hardware with Chrome OS, or you can get really ancient hardware with a modern, say, Windows operating system on it that doesn't run properly or doesn't run as much as it could because of that. And the reality is that a lot of schools are adopting G Suite for Education, which used to be called Google Apps for Education. G Suite is providing them the backbone for them to be able to run Google Classroom and all their other administrative and email and calendar and so on and so forth. And so now it's just a sort of an easy pairing to then have the students connect using Chromebooks. It makes a lot of sense. So I think that's one area where we're seeing a lot of investment, but I see so much potential across the entire sort of ecosystem of computing. Specifically to the topic of today, what I found really fascinating is that Chromebooks today, the Chrome OS platform, really has some missing elements. It doesn't sometimes have as much coordination between the touchscreen and what you would typically expect from a fully integrated system with applications. And so Google decided to just basically allow Android OS, that is Android apps, to be able to be utilized on a Chromebook now. So for those of you who don't know and you are thinking about whether or not you should get that, if you're comfortable with your smartphone or tablet, you can actually now engage any Chromebook with a touchscreen to engage. I think, at least I'll have to check on this and I'll put this in the show notes, but I believe that it's actually capable of being utilized even if you don't have a touchscreen. But the point is that basically any of the Chrome OS devices now allow you to use the Android apps directly on the Chromebook. So it opens up your Chromebook to, hundreds of thousands of applications and capabilities that it didn't once have. So very similar to sort of the parity that you're talking about, Augusto, in terms of iOS having all the functionality to do all of your computing needs. Well, I think at this point, Chromebook, with the addition of Android apps being able to be utilized on it, it's there. It's really fundamentally there.
Part because of what I do on my day-to-day, I have the luxury to play with a lot of technology. It's called work and that kind of things. But in reality, a lot of times it's play. And And it is incredible to me what you could do, with a Chrome OS machine. That I agree with you. A lot of schools have invested heavily, originally not necessarily for the right reasons, or maybe those were the right reasons. And the part of the reasons schools start investing heavily was a control issue. They could control what a device can do, what a device cannot do, install, not install, in an easier way than any platform, including Windows. And being Windows probably the second easiest platform to control this on a major scale. And that's part of the reason schools start investing heavily there. It was the cost was a factor, no question about it, but more than the factor of the cost was the other. But what people don't see and don't know is people look at these machines and say, well, they're a cheap alternative. I will not need for work a cheap alternative. And if you have never played with them, you will be surprised what a $200 machine. I'm not disagreeing. The $200 machine is not the best built. When you look even in the stores and now you go the high end of those machines, it is incredible how well built they are and how fast they work. It reminds me in a way, before many years back when you start getting the laptops, and you have the HPs of the world, the Lenovo's of the world, that were the high-end, quote-unquote, corporate machines where they were really well built. And then you start getting all these Chinese brands, and some of them has improved incredibly since, but they were really cheap machines with cheap quality and all that. They will just be able to do the work. That is a little bit of what happened in there, but for most companies, they will get a better control on their devices, for the companies who enjoy that, on a Chromebook, that even what they will get into a Windows machine. And when you go high-end versus high-end, that is anyways what most corporate companies will get, the quality and the hardware and the components, it is incredible, the difference, and it's incredible how well and how powerful the Chrome platform is and how well it works.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that if you purchase a Chromebook today and it's a new Chromebook, not one that's been resold, you start off with the Chromebook itself, and many times Google is giving away free credits to a year's worth of Google Drive at probably the 100 gigabyte or 1 terabyte level. You basically have the ability to go ahead and have all of the data on the Chromebook itself saved into Google Drive, so you have it accessible anywhere you might be connected to the internet. And the other great part about Chromebooks is, as you said, Augusto, the lightning speed at which they work. Since they basically are running a browser, the operating system itself is literally just the browser in front of you. It can launch and open incredibly fast. I think, from completely off to open, I think they say it takes about 8 seconds for the laptop to boot. And yes, I said 8 seconds, comparative to maybe sometimes 8 minutes for some Windows computers to boot. I used to do the, turn the computer on in the morning at the office and go get a cup of coffee and come back and wait for it to finally show me the login screen. And so we can all sort of, those of us of a certain age can remember that. And now, we have basically a Chromebook that you can open, and 8 seconds later, it goes from cold start to login screen in 8 seconds. If you just close the Chromebook and open it back up, it instantaneously turns back on when it's in sleep mode. So you're talking about a computer that has an incredibly fast, processing system that is the operating system itself, not including the processors that are running the code. So it's super cool in the sense that you have all of your Google products available to you. You have Google Docs, Google Drive, Gmail, and you name it. And some of the more high-end Chromebooks, like the Samsung Chromebook Plus, which as of the time of this recording is sort of the newest flagship, Chromebook that's out there for Google, and it's touchscreen. You flip it over and it becomes a tablet. It's just got some really, really cool features. It has a stylus that's built into the device, so you just sort of push a little button and the stylus pops out of the side of it, and it's also USB-C powered, so you can plug and connect to devices using USB-C, which is the same port for data transfer. It's just a really, really cool little system. But as Augusto said, the barrier to cost and affordability is so very low in the Google Chrome market, because you can buy into Google Chrome for as little as probably $150 for one of the entry level Chromebooks. So there's a lot going on there, but the system itself is pretty remarkable for what you can get for the cost. So just so we have a sort of a basic understanding of what the Chromebooks really do and what's allowed on them.
It is an interesting paradigm change that most people has been resistant, to it. Even to this day, I've been living on a iOS world now for a really long time, but it still impressed me how many people go and 5 to 10 minutes of their morning goes into restart that machine. It's something that I could not understand it before the iPad. That was one of my biggest pet peeves when I live on the PC world, and one of my happy things when I changed to the Mac in 2007. It was how quick my Mac could take me from power to working versus how long it took my PC to take me to do the same thing. And you think in 10 years that has improved, and apparently has not.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is that Microsoft needs to get their mobile world in order. I think that they really need to do something to really catch up in that market, and I don't have any belief that they won't. The reality is that in technology, especially with a juggernaut like Microsoft, they could do something if they could really turn their Windows mobile platform into something that was really amazing. Maybe if they really pushed their mobile platform a little more. I don't know what they could do to catch up, but I feel like they could. And it's sort of different than BlackBerry, which BlackBerry recently adopted the Android OS, and so now they have a line of BlackBerry devices with Android OS on it. But the reality is that they're very few, and not really sure BlackBerry has basically the money to survive in that market, right? So I'm not quite sure BlackBerry is going to be a winner because they don't have the resources. But Microsoft does have the resources to be able to pull up in this, but just sort of taking a step back, something we haven't talked about yet is the fact that Google, like we said at the top of this podcast, is Google has these two operating systems running independently of one another. They've kind of spliced one into the other, that is allowing Android applications onto Chromebooks. But Google has been working in the backgrounds to start the process of developing a whole new operating system. And sort of the foundational principles and the reasoning behind it is so that as Google creates more hardware, remember Google now has Google Home, they have the Chromecast line, they have the virtual headsets with the Google VR Dream headsets and Google Cardboard, I suppose. They have, all of these various connected devices, and they have the Brillo platform and so on and so forth. They have a lot of different devices now that they have to support in addition to their phones, right? The Pixel, Pixel C, and the Nexus line of phones. And so Google is going to want to create some efficiency there. And I think that's where the development of this new operating system, currently sort of code name, I think, is Fuchsia, with the original, sort of the first edition being Andromeda, or the first version being Andromeda. And this is the idea of being able to pull together an omni operating system that will be able to be utilized on your phone, tablet, computing device, whatever it might be, with that thing that we currently call a laptop, but comes in many different forms now, to our home, home voice assistant like the Google Home, to your television. All of these devices will soon be running, maybe your refrigerator and your stove and your microwave, they'll all be running the same operating system, just in their own flavor for its device. So I think that's really fascinating, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, Augusto, on whether or not other major tech like Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, and so on and so forth, if all of a sudden people have, Android Auto, running in their car and all of these other places, this Omni operating system that really closes out, edges out the other market players from the ecosystem, whether or not they would want to respond by doing something similar.
Android, it's done, or Google has done an incredible job. And I think one of the biggest threats, specifically for Microsoft, is Android. And the reason is, if people discover they don't need their Windows machines.
And by the way, you don't.
Right. And by the way, you don't. As more people come and discover that, Google has done something really game changer when they went and merged, Chrome and their Android platform, allowing really a universal device. So do I think they can do a really interesting shake on technology as we understand it? And the answer is yes. And they could be a really big problem for Apple and for Microsoft, because the latest version of Windows, I'm sorry to say, but they are, exciting is not exactly a word that will come to anybody who uses mine. Nobody will say, there was a time where you will get excited because the new version of Windows was coming out. Okay, and now you don't. When Steve Jobs announced the iPads, he said, well, PCs are going to be like trucks. And people laugh at that comment, and you can look on the web, because that's one of the big things on the web, okay, and you can find the comments of people, big technology names at the time that I'm sure they will love if you cannot find those quotes, okay, laughing about that comment, okay, and in less than 10 years, we are seeing that is true, okay, they have turned to be junk, ineffective, and slow devices, period. That's, the nicest you can define it. And as soon as people, Microsoft, if you go back, again, 10 years back, if you will ask people to do a document, okay, for people, the only way to do a document was using Microsoft Word. That's not a reality on most minds these days. Okay, same thing with Excel, same thing with PowerPoint. And I'm not saying they don't have things that they do really well. I'm just saying it's not the standard anymore. Okay, and more, Google has been turned the standards. And I believe unless Microsoft does something really innovative, and it need to be something, amazingly better than Chrome and to Google, they are going to be in trouble, because nobody is excited to use a PC these days. You used to, and I understand, I move myself in a world where there is a lot of geeks and there is a lot of people using machines. I can't recall the last time somebody with excitement showed me their PC. Okay, I can't. I have seen people excited about iPads, Chromes, mobile phones, tablets, but I don't recall the last time somebody came with their PC laptop, regardless of the brand. Okay, come excitement. Even the efforts Microsoft has been done with the Surface, okay, I have not seen a lot of people excited by them.
I was
So,
gonna say the Surface. I think is one of the few exceptions to what you just said. Is that I actually really do like the Surface, and the Surface Pro 3 that I use at work is actually really great. But you're right. You don't see a lot of people running around screaming from the hilltops that it's fantastic. It is. I think it's great. But I think it's a remnant, sort of device. Even with its sort of innovation, it's just basically taking what was already on the market and putting some good hardware behind it, and then throwing Windows RT on it.
right, right, and that make that people, hey, yes, it is great. Oh, yes, it is a good machine, but nobody's excited about it. Nobody's saying, oh, you know what, this will really, really make a difference, or this will change everything, or this. No, it's just, I like, like you as a user. I know a couple of people who use them, but there is not. They will tell people who, again, on my gig world, okay, who have them, they will tell you it's the best hardware you can find to run Windows. Okay, but it's a really cold, objective message and not an excitement thing. Instead, get a phone, get a tablet, and people will be excited to show you. And I think that's a sign of where things are going. I have people show me with much more excitement a high-end Chromebook than a Surface.
Oh yeah. Because it's the brilliance of this fairly light device. It has 8 to 13 hours of battery life, so it's going to last your entire workday without being plugged in. You can just be on the go and get what you need done. You flip over the screen and it becomes a tablet. You flip it back over, you start typing. There's a lot of really amazing stuff that the Chrome OS platform provides, and I think that as soon as we find an operating system that it develops into, I think that Apple and Microsoft and the rest of them are really going to, and I think Microsoft of all of them has done and has been working on this idea of having, basically the universal Windows, what do they call the UWP or whatever it is, Universal Windows, whatever, so that, design and programming and everything else is sort of streamlined into this particular view. And it's really important, I think, for us all to recognize that whether it's the Universal Windows platform or we choose Google, whatever Google calls it, let's just call it, I'm just going to call it Chrome OS / Android, and whatever it becomes once Google completely finishes this new platform, or choosing Apple, you're really choosing an ecosystem. And that I think is really important for us all to recognize, is that, there's going to come a point where this idea of having, say, I have an Android Wear watch, and I have an Android phone, and I have, many different kinds of operating systems on computers. I have my MacBook, I have, Windows computers, I have lots of Windows computers, I have Linux, I have, Windows running on, Windows RT running on the Surface Pro. Well, someday it's going to be really difficult to have all of that interacting with one another like completely within one ecosystem. You know what I mean? You're not going to be able to do that as easily. And that actually is something that's worrisome to me. I don't want to be locked into a specific ecosystem. I say that probably a little bit hypocritically, because most of what I run is Google based. So it doesn't really matter what platform I'm on, because I'm basically accessing all of those Google services across all of the devices, even to the very fundamental fact that, I use G Suite in business and then I use my Google account in my personal life. And so through those Google logins, I'm using that to log into almost everything. If it doesn't have Google login, I usually don't use it, because I want to be able to have that level of security for accessing different applications. And so, across the many devices, I'm using Google almost in every way, that for me to transition back to an all Apple environment would be very, very difficult for me today, to literally remove Google from my life. And I think that's again, something that should be, thoughtful when you're choosing a platform. I think it's really important for us all to take that into account.
That's correct. Actually, I believe this is Amazon has the power to do checkmate any day they want, in the sense that Amazon has an incredible knowledge of what our computer taste, needs and use are, in more detail than we even may be aware of. And they have play and experience with hardware for now many, many years. They have developed their own flavor of the Android, and I think with the new changes that Google is doing on Android, we may see, if they figured out a way to do it in a revolutionary way, we may see the first computer Android-based, Chromebook-based, from Amazon, and base it on the distribution power they have. We are going to see a lot of manufacturers in deep, deep trouble, because, for good or for bad, when Amazon gets into that game, they already have an infrastructure there is no way to build. Even if you go to the ebook market, with all that Apple has tried to conquer, they are not even close to conquer that, because you can't beat the infrastructure that the Kindle has as a platform. And I think that's one of the other things that is a persistent threat for the whole hardware market. As much as I like iOS, really Android has an advantage that most people is unaware of, but where they can come and really do checkmate any time of the week. Now, with all these changes they are doing, the experience they have with the mobile, the integration, the web, I have no doubt that the next iteration of their system is going to really change things on ways people are not even expecting, to the point that the software world as we understand it, it's not going to be the same.
Well, the curious part for me is that, we already have Android-based tablets. There's the Lenovo YogaBook Android tablet, which is really amazing. So for those of you who don't know about it, it basically is, the YogaBook is this cool device that has this very specialized hinge, but on one side is your screen, on the other side is something called the Halo keyboard, and it's basically a Wacom keyboard with some really cool software with a haptic feedback keyboard. And so that means when you touch it, it gives you, a little vibration buzz when you go ahead and touch it. And you have the ability to draw on it like you would, pen to paper kind of feeling to it, or at least not the feel to it, but certainly accuracy in terms of drawing. So for artists, you basically have an Android operating system based tablet that you can do fairly sophisticated drawing. You can throw a sheet of paper on it, draw on the paper, and it captures what you've written using the stylus onto your YogaBook, and you can capture that data directly into digital. You can have the handwritten version, but the digital version's captured behind that. So I think, in a lot of ways, we're kind of there, Augusto, in the sense that, there's just this plethora of option, and, we're seeing Android, I said this probably going back 6 or 7 years ago, people would say, well, which is the operating system of the, which operating system should I go with, when it comes to smartphones or devices and whatnot. And, the way I always saw it was, you have Apple, which is a premium, you have to be of a certain income level and a certain sort of, ability to basically afford Apple, and I believe in Apple as being a premium product. It's a luxury product, and that's okay. What I think Apple did in terms of its mistake was it tried to go out to the masses, and when you try to sell an $800 phone to people living in poverty, I don't think that's not the appropriate market, and it has become a status symbol. So you have a lot of people here in the United States. We tend to think about mobile phones or smartphones being cheaper, but that's just because in the rest of the world, they don't pay the same way we do. So the telecoms typically subsidize our phones, so they're cheaper if we stay with them, right? So we sign a contract, we stay with them longer, and therefore we get our phones for a little bit cheaper. Overseas, they have very different models. A lot of people have to buy their phones outright and then connect it to a service. I particularly like I think it's the Japanese model, where you pay a monthly fee, and I think we have that in the United States starting to sort of make its way in, but you just basically pay a monthly fee. Say it's $15, $20, $30 a month, and you pay until you own your phone, and then you can swap it out when you get done paying for it, which is usually it's sort of end of life anyway. And so we have this, what I believe is a sort of a cheaper entry into the market than the actual cost of these devices. And so Apple has come out there and been able to put iPhones into the hands of a lot of people who I don't think should really or are capable of affording it long term. And so they then get the phone breaks, and then they're like, oh, well, you have to replace it. And it's like, oh, well, I don't have $600 to replace it with that kind of thing. And so then they go to the Android platform, and it's like, oh, great, I can spend $200 and get a phone that'll work, and it'll do everything I really need it to do, and it'll have all the same apps pretty much, and we're good to go. So I think we're in sort of that space where the Android operating system itself can be put on almost any device, including an iPhone with a little bit of jerry rigging, and so you get this operating system that can go on almost anything, tablets, computers. It's going to win. It's going to win the market in terms of being installed on the most devices. So, and that's the reality of it's free, as opposed to iOS, which is not free. You'd have to pay Apple in order to be able to install it on another device, and I'm not even sure Apple would allow that. And then the specifications for that are very, custom. They're tied to the hardware it's associated with, so you really can't install iOS on very many other things other than things that Apple has developed, for that purpose. So the closed system world is, I think at the end of the day, just sort of, and then I'll stop ranting. But the idea here of this closed operating system, an operating system that other people can't see the code. What we would consider free software on the opposite side of that, or open source software. I think the open source software world is definitely going to win here. Even if you're paying for the hardware and paying for services, the underlying code itself is it being free is what's going to win in the world, because the ability to freely, what I mean by free is being able to openly see its code and being able to manipulate that code means that it can be installed on many devices across an ecosystem, and that's not going to hinder people across any economic class, which means that more people can get it on their devices.
I agree with you in that, and again, it is when you get out of the United States, it's exactly what happened. We hear and yes, you're right. Now, Verizon and AT&T and I think even T-Mobile are trying to, or adopting probably the last 2 years or so, the Japanese model. But when you go outside of the United States, to the more developing countries, the Latin America, the Africa, India, and so far, so on, even China. Now you need to pay for your device. That, as you said, then an iPhone is a high-end product that not everybody can afford, but a lot of people can. I don't know what are the proportions, but I know when you go to specifically Latin America, mostly because it's where I travel and where I do some business, it's most of the people have an Android. the iPhone is really a high-end luxury item. More than the rule is the exception, and it's in part because of that. Because it doesn't matter if you can afford this $800 phone or the $100 phone, okay, you can have a phone. For most of these developing countries, their phone is their only computer. And not only that, a lot of these people has learned that they don't need any other thing. Many years ago, for a lot of these people, where a computer were not even a dream to have. Okay, and now all of them can have a computer, a full computer, where they can do a lot of the work, for not to say everything, okay, that a person can do with a full-fledged computer. I understand the limitations on the screen, but what some people don't understand is the for some people the states is, well, should I pick the 13 inches or the 15 inches? For them is, should I work on my 4 inches or nothing? When that is a completely different consideration, and that makes you having a 4-inch computer fully on your pocket. Again, going back to historic devices. Okay, when I went to law school, okay, I had a what was at the time a Palm Pilot professional, and I had an external keyboard. Okay, and even that at that time a laptop was $3,000 to $5,000, and for $500 I could do, understanding I was a geek, but I could do a lot of what people could not even accomplish on those $4,000 devices. Again, I could get to court and take notes better than anybody, and even because of my geeky inclinations, email them. Okay, when emails was this weird thing, even before I get to the office if I choose to. So, that now it's coming to the reality, and I think what I'm still waiting, and this is now my geek wish. Many years ago, when Palm Computing went out of business, Palm Computing announced a product that was going to call the Folio. Okay, that people laugh at them. Okay, and for some geeks like me, it was a dream come true, and it was basically a terminal, a dumb terminal where you connect your phone to, and now you get a bigger screen, okay, and a full-size keyboard, okay, but your main computer, according to that project, was going to be your phone. You just pair it via Bluetooth, and then you will get a full whatever was the size of the screen, I don't remember, but and I'm still waiting for that device. And I know HP has the patent for that, and there is a project for HP to release now a device like that, because the reality is our phones are so powerful these days, computing power based, that they can do that, and just have your computer. When you get to the office, you dock that phone, and now you use the thing full-fledged on a 19-inch monitor. And I'm still waiting for that, and that may be the only thing that will make me consider go back to a PC if HP do that, because then I will have everything on my pocket. But getting out of the rant and agreeing with you in this, I think if Windows don't do something completely revolutionary like that, Android has been eating them, even to the point that if you think about the following. Years ago, Microsoft Office, okay, was probably the most expensive software in your machine unless you have Adobe, okay? And today, they have been forced to make it affordable, otherwise people don't want it. And
yeah, you pay a couple bucks a month now for it, as opposed to before.
Right. And not only that, it's coming to the point where even with that, they are having issues getting people to install them and use them. There are so many good, even better in some cases, propositions in the market that it's not needed.
Yeah, well, I mean, they launched, Microsoft Online because of that. There just weren't enough Microsoft Office users that the only way to sell them on being able to, subscribe to Microsoft Office 365 or something like that, where you could actually purchase the Office suite for the desktop, was through them selling to you through Microsoft Online and having that free service. And so they're going to get squeezed. I mean, when you can have a Google Drive environment where you can use Google Docs and Google Sheets and Google Slides, basically Word, Excel and PowerPoint for free in the web, and all of that, collaborative ability for no cost, what's the use of buying Microsoft? And there are some power users of Office that do require the desktop version, but that's a very, very small market. It's a very small market.
I hope we have give something clear to the people of where we see this mobile world really taking over. I laugh when I wrote iPad only book. I used to laugh at people saying, that will never happen. And I used to remind people, yes, well, many years ago when the laptop came in, the laptop were never going to substitute the power of the desktops. Okay, and I don't know many people these days that have a desktop. Okay, and I think we are back into that same point where the tablets and the mobile devices are now being more powerful than many of these laptops, and I think people is coming to the mainstream to the point that people is finally discovering, this may be an option, and I think we are going to start now seeing how that evolution now is going to start really taking over the laptops and computing as we know it. It's going to evolve again in the same way it changed or it evolved from the desktop to the laptop. And I, for one, am really excited to see what is next.
I think the quotation to close us out today is the one of Nelson Mandela, which is, "It always seems impossible until it's done." And I think that's the case of sort of the app world today, the app ecosystem, along with the desktop software ecosystem and our connectedness to the internet, as well as IoT, Internet of Things, which I'm sure we'll talk about in future episodes. But the reality is that we are in this, sort of brave new technological world in which mobile will dominate. I think I can't believe this, but Augusto and I agree on almost everything today that we talked about. And so, the reality is here we are in this brave new technological digital world that is really fundamentally going mobile. And soon, I think that it's very true that our phones or other mobile devices will be our primary sole computing device, and we'll just sort of connect to these dummy terminals that are able to, pull in the data and processing power of what's in our pockets, potentially even smaller than that, maybe, what's attached to our wrists if we have, smartwatches that are that powerful as well. So we're there. And we're going to be continuing to move that peg forward out to sort of a mass environment. And I think that's really, really very interesting. And I think that that's going to affect all of our productivity in that way. It's going to make us have to become aware of the platform or the ecosystem that we choose. So thank you all for listening. This has been, I thought, a really fun chat with you, Augusto, regarding what's sort of going on in the Google world and mobile world generally. And hopefully we'll see you or you'll hear us on the next episode of Productivity Cast, the weekly show of all things productivity. Thanks so much, and here's to your productive life.
That's it for this episode of Productivity Cast, the weekly show about all things productivity, with your hosts, Ray Sidney Smith and Augusto Pinaud.